over introduction and assignments and announcements. And then we will go straight into team presentations. There will be, each team will present roughly for about 20-25 minutes, and then we'll have a quick Q&A for that particular team. After all three teams have presented, we will have a wrap up and we'll open things up for all questions and thoughts on how the Datathon went and things like that. All right, so brief background. So this Datathon was put together by two data groups in Philadelphia, so RLadies Philly and DataPhilly. RLadies Philly is a worldwide organization that promotes gender diversity in the R community and in the data science community more broadly. We do this through meetups, mentorship, and we really encourage a friendly and collaborative environment. DataPhilly is also a very strong local data group, and it is a group of data professionals and enthusiasts who learn about the latest technologies and models in data science, and they organize really cool speaker events, workshops, and networking. So check out check out our websites. Couple of announcements from both of our groups before we begin. So for RLadies, there is a mentor speaker directory. So if you're looking for speakers in data science, go and check it out. Or if you would like to volunteer to be a mentor for less experienced data scientists, feel free to sign up. We have a YouTube channel where we will be putting all of our recordings, including this one. So check it out after this event. And if you'd like to join us on Slack, click on that link, get an invite. Couple of heads up, so we will have a few events coming up, a happy hour once the weather turns nice, so stay tuned for that one. And we are looking to organize some lightning talks, so if you have a really cool topic or a really neat thing that you'd like to share with the R community, click on that link and sign up for the talks, 10 minutes, 15-minute talk. So we'll share the slides after the event. On the DataPhilly side, we also, you can go and check out past speakers and talks on their GitHub or on their YouTube channel. And join their Slack community. It's also a very vibrant community over there, so there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. And in terms of upcoming events, there will be a career advice workshop in April, but date is still TBD, and an IT fundamentals for data scientists. Again, details will be hashed out, but stay tuned for those. Now, about the Datathon. So the Datathons, we've organized one of these every year, and we're really excited because this is a chance not just for data scientists to learn new skills and work collaboratively, but we also get a chance to help organizations in the Philly community by donating our time and our expertise. So we're really excited about that. Our Datathons are hands-on collaborative work. We work with real data that our partners have put together and have made available to us. So we're very appreciative for that. We also, through our Datathons, want to serve a good cause and make a real impact. So it's not just analyzing some random data set, but the conclusions are really going to make an impact. Our partners are going to really listen. They're here on this meetup, so they will have questions, and they will take this back and build upon our work from these Datathons. Every contribution is valuable and everyone can learn something. So we encourage everyone to speak up. If you have questions, if you have comments, it's really designed to be a collaborative space. The current Datathon has partnered with ElderNet, and ElderNet is an organization that provides a safety net for older and disabled adults to help them remain in their homes, and strengthens the food and financial security for all community members who are in need of assistance. So it's a really wonderful organization that is very connected to the people in need in their community. And we have Brandon here with us. He's the executive director of ElderNet, and he's joined by one or two other people from ElderNet, so they're very excited to see our results. ElderNet does provides a host of services to people in the community through volunteer services, such as driving people to and from appointments and things like that, or helping clients with odd jobs. They also offer care management, which is support, information, referrals, and guidance with regarding to care. And they provide a lot of community resources that are invaluable to the people in the community. So food pantry, care coordination, Ask a Nurse program, and emergency financial assistance. So there are a lot of different areas in which ElderNet impacts the community. And one of the main ask that has come to us from ElderNet with regard to this Datathon was for us to help ElderNet understand how they are impacting the community, how they are helping members or clients stay in their homes longer, and also provide some insight from the data when it comes to future directions, areas for growth, and help with decision making so that decisions can be driven by analytics and data insights. So with that said, before we move into the teams and I hand it over to the teams, you'll see, I just want to make sure everyone knows this little green button here. That is where we will have all of our Q&A set up. So that is a link through Slido. If you go to sli.do and type in this number, you will get to the Q&A platform. So you can submit your question anonymously and it's going to show up on a list. And at the end of each team's presentation, we'll go through that list and ask a few of the questions. We might not be able to ask them all, but we will try to get through as many as we can for each team. So put your questions in there. And so we'll do this after each presentation. And at the end, we will open it up and we'll want to hear your thoughts and input, and any other questions that are still unanswered, we will try to address at the end. So with that said, one other thing is we are recording the meetup. You probably have seen the message come up. So because we're recording the meetup, please be mindful of sharing your video. So if you're not actively presenting, you might want to turn your video off. Same with keeping your microphone muted. Make sure you do that just so that it doesn't cause any interference. And otherwise, feel free to chat with others during the presentations, use the chat, and enjoy the presentations. So with that said, I think I've covered all the things. I know it was a lot, but I will hand it over to team 1, which was asked to look into ElderNet's impact in the community. And I know they've done a ton of work. Actually, all the teams have done a ton of work on this. So I'm really, really excited to see what they have to share with us. So team 1, take it from here. I'm going to stop my share and you can go ahead and share. There you go.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Sumner Siebels. I am on team 1. I'm the first one talking, so nice to meet all of you. So our goal here on team 1 was to examine ElderNet's impact in the community. And as we move on to the next slide, we were given some objectives to initially to look at. We were told to look at how has ElderNet helped clients remain in their home longer? How well is ElderNet connecting participants to the public benefits they need? And how do counties served by ElderNet compare to similar counties where services like ElderNet are not available? And to look at how we try to answer these objectives, I want to tell you guys a story. And this is a story about a person, a real person, who for the sake of anonymity, we're going to be calling 508. 508 is a person living in poverty in Montgomery County. The first mention that we see of 508 in the data is a call that they made to ElderNet in April of 2019. Now, within 2 days of that call, ElderNet had sent a volunteer directly into their home for a visit that lasted just under an hour. Later that same year, ElderNet helped 508 enjoy a bountiful Thanksgiving feast by providing them with a 30-pound holiday gift basket. Now, the data doesn't say whether 508 enjoyed that basket, but I personally think they did. And the reason that I think that is because they got the exact same gift basket the following year when Thanksgiving of 2020 rolled around. But the help did not stop there. It continued well into 2021. In April of that year, 508 reached out to ElderNet in a call that lasted over an hour. We don't know exactly what was said on that phone call, but we do know how ElderNet responded. Within 2 days of that call, they had sent a volunteer to take 50 out for errands. And in the course of the following 2 weeks, ElderNet sent drivers to take 508 to more than 4 hours of doctor's visits. Taken together, this story of help and care that spanned the course of 2 of the most tumultuous years in American history and included 10 interactions with a multitude of services, well, taken together, that story seems remarkable, but it wasn't. In the context of what ElderNet was doing during this period, the story of 508 is actually very ordinary. So ordinary that I can tell you that the way that we found it was simply by counting for each client how many times they directly interacted with ElderNet services. And we sorted it from top to bottom, and right in the middle of the list, that's where we found 508. So 50% of ElderNet's clients use services as much or more than them. This is a story that was repeated hundreds of times for hundreds of clients. And taken in the aggregate, that story is remarkable. And I will now remark on it with this slide, the story in aggregate. So some numbers. Overall, we found 21,504 instances of direct care from ElderNet to clients. 766 of these instances were visits by volunteers, and those lasted over 485 hours. ElderNet volunteers were on the phone directly with clients for over 638 hours. And the pantry gave out over 145,000 pounds of food, which, just to give you a sense of scale, is equivalent to about 12 adult African bush elephants, though hopefully that is not where the food came from. ElderNet also provided 2,102 rides to doctor's appointments. And this is an area where you can really see the direct impact of ElderNet, because if you think about what these people's lives would have been like if they had not been able to make those doctor's appointments, it is kind of scary. So now that we've told you the story of both an average client as well as the story of all of the services in total, we also need to look at stories at the extremes. If people needed extraordinary help, was ElderNet able to give that extraordinary help to them? And look at some numbers that, to me, show yes. So 146, that is the most number of rides someone gave. We gave them the name Anne to doctor's appointments. 40, that's the amount of rides that someone received for shopping. We named them Janelle. Frida received 2,350 pounds of food, which, just to give you a sense of scale, is equivalent to 1/5 of one adult African bush elephant. So that's food for thought. And so those are cases at the extremes. Those are the most in those categories, but these people were by no means alone in receiving a lot of help from ElderNet. We found over 119 clients that use services 50 or more times, and we found 66 clients who use services 100 or more times. And so that really shows both the depth as well as the breadth of the services that ElderNet was providing. And now that I've told you the story of an average client as well as the total story and the story of the extremes, I'm going to throw it over to my colleague, Catherine, who will tell you something about demographics.
All right, thank you, Sumner, for that great kind of introduction. Basically, we were curious about the demographics of the ElderNet clients and how that may impact the way that they would interact with the various services. We did find that there were a number of missing values in the data sets, and it made us a little hesitant to draw some significant conclusions from various subsets of clients. But what it did inspire us to do is to look at that section of the brief where we were asked to look at the surrounding counties. What we did instead was look within Montgomery County, just in the other townships surrounding Lower Merion and Narberth. And we pulled in the census data, so the American Community Survey, the 5-year American Community Survey data from the US Census Bureau, and then also the census population estimates from 2019 to take a look at the Montgomery County The first thing we did was look at the estimated median income, and we found that the estimated median income in the Lower Merion Township was actually higher than any of the other townships in the county. And we also looked at poverty rates and found that only around 6% of Montgomery County residents fall below the federal poverty level. However, when we look at the ElderNet client cohort, we see that although just as a disclaimer, the definition of poverty in the data set was potentially a little different from that used in the census data, we do find that almost 2/3 of these clients may indeed be in poverty. And this seems like a striking difference, but I think what this really brings home is the reach that ElderNet has to these vulnerable clients in the community. I think that this is reassuring data because it helps us to know that in an area where some may find or some may assume that a service such as ElderNet may not be required, indeed it is required and by a large number of people in the community. Although slightly out of our remit, we did also note that there's also potential for ElderNet to expand into other townships in this county or present a model of service to similar organizations where there does appear to be a lower level of income. We also looked at race in the area. We did find a much more modest difference here, but I think I hope it also reflects a similar story where we have 21% of Montgomery County residents identifying as minority race and a number higher than that among the ElderNet clients. So although not applied statistical analysis here, I would hope that this reflects that ElderNet is reaching communities of color in the area as well. And with that brief overview of the demographics, I am going to hand you over to Carl to talk about the data.
Thank you, Catherine. As Sumner mentioned earlier, two of the biggest categories of help from ElderNet were rides and pantry. So we wanted to break those down and look at the different categories of assistance and the amount of assistance. So when we looked at ridership by category, we saw that over a 26-month period, there were over 4,100 rides given to ElderNet clients. And of those, over 2,100 were to doctor's appointments. Next up was shopping, friendly visits, pantry visits, and errands. And you can see by the shopping and the pantry that food distribution was showing the high level of food insecurity addressed by ElderNet. And if you look at the ridership, the 30-day rolling average, we wanted to see how did ridership vary over time? Was it seasonal? And as you notice in the slide here, right around the start of the pandemic, when nobody knew quite what was going on, ridership plummeted, and it has not yet fully recovered to pre-pandemic levels, but it has started to come back from where it was. So it'll be interesting to see over the next year how that continues. Then we decided to look at pantry food aid, and it's stunning. They gave over 145,000 pounds of food distributed, 25 pounds at a time. And as Sumner said, that's more than 12 bull elephants amount of food. So obviously there's a real need in the community for food, and ElderNet is doing a lot to get there. So the pantry average use, we wanted to look at how often do people come to the pantry? Is there any seasonality or are there any trends we can see? So early on, there was a continual increase in the amount of people using the pantry. We're not sure whether this was due to better marketing, advertising, just getting the word out, or an increased need. Right around the time of the pandemic, there was a plateau. And then at first glance, it looked like a big drop off. But then if you look at this data was over a 2-year period, it seems like there is a seasonal ramp up in pantry usage around the end of the year, November, December, and then a drop off towards summer. It'll be interesting to see going forward if these trends continue. And if so, that would be a indication to ElderNet that they need to, stock up extra food in the winter months, but won't need as much food on hand in the summer months. And with that, I'm going to hand it on to Brendan.
Thanks, Carl. So kind of continuing with this like time series view of the data here, this chart shows kind of total monthly client encounters each month for the different services offered. And what I think what's interesting, and Carl highlighted it in the previous slide, is when the pandemic hit, we actually see the pantry usage kind of spike and kind of sustain over those few couple months, early into the pandemic, which is interesting. There are some reference lines here for the first COVID case reported in PA, as well as when the vaccine rolled out, which is phase 1B rollout, which are those people over 75, which likely kind of impact the ElderNet clients. So yeah, you can kind of see after that vaccine rolled out, the data kind of picks back up a little bit, or at least kind of levels off a little bit. It looks like also something kind of occurred in the summer of 2020 for the lighter purple line, the care management services was impacted there. A little bit of a lag effect maybe over the pandemic, but something that definitely stood out in the data. And while this slide shows kind of the numbers in aggregate, it kind of offers a monthly kind of snapshot of kind of the total encounters here. It doesn't offer too much about sort of consistent or repeated client interactions with ElderNet, and that's kind of the story we wanted to tell in terms of, consistently active and recurring clients. And so if we could develop sort of this active client definition, maybe we can gain some insight into how clients are using the services kind of continuously over time, and start to kind of understand the continuous value that ElderNet's providing. So we took a stab at trying to do just that. So we attempted to define an active client. And like I said, tracking these active clients over time can hopefully give some insight into the value that ElderNet's provided in a consistent way. And so the definition that we kind of used here, just for the purposes of this slide, is any client that used at least one service offered, whether that's the pantry, volunteer services, or care management, in at least one of the 2 previous months. So the idea here is it's sort of a rolling indicator with this inclusion criteria. Clients can enter and exit as they use the services, and if they continue to use the services, they remain an active client. And this chart shows kind of a sum of all active clients over the time throughout the life of the data set that we have here. So it's clear, and probably not a surprise, that the pandemic definitely impacted this utilization. Again, with those reference lines in place, we can see maybe a little bit of an uptick, post the vaccine rollout, which could indicate that, again, this is sort of a lagging indicator. So we would expect a month or two, to kind of to see a change here. And I think our goal wasn't to be too prescriptive with this. Like, we weren't trying to say this is how you should define an active client. I think we just wanted to provide an idea of how a metric like this could be used to track, consistent usage over time, and therefore help gain some infer kind of the value that ElderNet is offering the clients here. So we hope this definition could help, maybe spark a new idea or show kind of value over time. And then thank you. The next slide here is we wanted to stratify these active clients across minority status and poverty status. And I think what stood out here was that minority clients, regardless of their poverty status, tended to remain consistently active using our definition here throughout the pandemic. Although it's hard to draw conclusions, as Catherine mentioned, given the missing data here. We just hope that this metric could, be valuable to ElderNet leadership to both, monitor client usage of their services at a higher level, and then maybe identify when changes in these usage patterns occur, and therefore, it might be an indicator to take some action, or, just investigate further. But I think the fact that sort of the darker purple lines tended to remain pretty consistent, throughout the course of the pandemic, I think is an interesting fact, and kind of shows how much of a lifeline some of these services were to these clients, that they remained consistently active throughout the pandemic. And then we wanted to kind of start to conclude things here by, some questions that we considered, but, just didn't have time to answer, or maybe didn't have, the full data set to answer. They were hoping, but we wanted to kind of raise these questions because we did put some time into them. So, without sort of the outcome data of an indicator of when the client officially kind of stopped using the services or not, we would like to ideally be able to figure out, which services were likely to enable clients to stay in their home. Incorporating some sort of COVID vaccine status in the data would be great. Kind of diving a little bit further into changes that occurred of the pandemic, trying to like tease out maybe some of the causes for that, like is it a supply or demand, like what's kind of driving that reduction that we're seeing. And then obviously like telemedicine kind of was a huge response to the pandemic, and sort of where things kind of shifted from in-person visits to telemedicine, and just would that sort of be a cause for some of the changes we saw in the data here. So yeah, just some conclusions here. Based on these typical usage, transportation to doctors, appointments, very highly desired service, as well as the pantry, consistently used, highly valuable. We saw some of the impact of the pandemic on our active client definition, but also some evidence that these active clients began to creep back up, after the vaccine rollout. And then finally, I think linking this information to the current in-home status of the clients would allow more insight into the effectiveness of the services. I think that was the main conclusion that we drew as a team. Like, we would love to be able to kind of have that outcome and link this up. And I think that could really help to, drive further data analysis in the future. Hopefully if that data would be available. But I think that's the end of our slides here. So I'm happy to, I guess, I'll offer up the team to answer any questions or any comments or questions. I think we'd be happy to do it, but thank you.
Great presentation, Team One, and a lot of really, really interesting findings. I will share my screen with the questions that have been posted so far, but I will encourage participants, if you have questions, feel free to post them on here. But before we get into these, I'd like to ask ElderNet if they have any questions and any thoughts based on these results that they've seen so far.
I'll say that this was, I've never been so interested to know more about bull elephants than right now. But no, I thank you very much. The conclusions that you came to are actually very helpful, and it's already started to shift the way that I'm thinking about what we do and how we collect our data. One of the things that I think was probably the most challenging is that prior to 2019, most of our data was kept in Excel spreadsheets that were just scattered everywhere. So to be able to pull the information and the conclusions that you did with just the little bit of data that you had is really amazing, and I want to thank you very, very much for that. I really appreciate your taking a stab in creating something at the active client definition. It's something that if we keep people active on as long as they're not deceased, we keep them as active, no matter how much they use it. But in trying to maybe approach different funders, and that will give us some different ways to look at it. But also the suggestions that you had for how to being able to link more data to what you have going on or what you would like to see. With the changes in the systems we're using, that's going to be possible moving forward. So I am going to take what you're suggesting. We're going to implement that so we can start making some more connections and hopefully get to some better data. But I will say that I did submit the question on Slido about the poverty level, which one was used. Going back to that slide, seeing that 2/3 of our population are in poverty, and I'm just wondering what level of poverty you use to define poverty and non, because there could be an answer to that.
I can take that answer because that was part of the data pre-processing. So because we wanted this data set was public, and we wanted to protect the identity of the clients as much as possible. So there weren't it wasn't a very large data set. So our main concern was with being able to identify these clients based on different subgroupings. So we did not make available the definition of how that poverty level was arrived at in the processing of the data, but we will share it with ElderNet directly after the Datathon.
Okay, because we use a very generous definition of poverty to be able to assist more people, so that probably played into it a little bit as well. And just to so that I'm not just asking questions but answering questions. At the beginning of the pandemic, the drop in rides was completely demand-based. Doctors' offices just canceled everything. So even we had volunteers that were still willing to do so, but there was just nowhere to take them. So that drove that one. And there was the final question on the slide. I do not recall what it was at the moment, but there was I had an answer to that as well, but it slips my mind at the moment. So, but no, I thank you all very much, Team One, for putting this together. It's going to be very helpful, particularly as we start to make some changes to the organization.
Thank you, Brendan, and thank you, Team One. And we have a couple more questions here that were submitted to Slido. I hope people can see my screen, but I'll just read them off. So Team One, do you have any insights into how long clients stay active using your definition of an active client, and possibly what leads them to disengage? Have you tried to explore that? I know it wasn't a complete data set and there were a lot of problems, but I was curious if you tried to explore that.
Sure, I can try to answer that, but I'm happy to have other input from the teammates as well. I think we spent a little bit. So to answer the question, we didn't really investigate how long like the average client stays active. We spent a lot of time discussing pros and cons of different ways to even measure an active client. So I think that would be a great next step, would like dive into how long a client stays active. I think when we started, we were maybe a little bit too strict with how we defined an active client. I think it was like average of 2 or 3 services over the past 3 months, which is like maybe a little bit too strict. So we played around with the different ways to define it. But yeah, great next step would be to like, how long is an average client active? And then I think the question was other ways they might disengage. It's hard to say. Some clients, they just, you see like they use some services and then all of a sudden they kind of stop, and it's hard to really know why without sort of that outcome data available to us. But at least maybe the hope was that this active client indicator could maybe throw an alert for like, because maybe a client who is really active all of a sudden becomes inactive, and that could be a prompt to maybe investigate why. That's how we were kind of thinking of it.
Thank you. And yeah, if in the report you might be able to share how you came to the definition of an active client and what other definitions you explored. I'm sure that would be helpful to ElderNet as they try to define this going forward. Another question. So great job creating a story. Was there any data that was not available, but you really wished you could have had available?
Well, the first thing was what Brendan just mentioned about how could we tell whether a client was actually still officially part of ElderNet or not. We looked at different metrics like, had they not used a service in 90 days, or had they not used a service in 30 days, but we couldn't really find anything that seemed a clear-cut metric to define, to infer a client is no longer active within ElderNet. So if there was some way ElderNet could indicate, if they know whether the client is still in their home or not, then that would help. Then you could do a lot more analysis like, oh, people that take an average of X rides per quarter are more likely to stay in their home, or people that get a certain amount of food. Another thing we were interested in was whether clients were on Medicare or not. We had the poverty flag, but we didn't have the Medicare. And since we're guessing it probably by the name, they skew elderly, that would be another indicator or another point of data that might be interesting to look at.
Yeah, obviously it's not something that can be shared in a public forum like this Datathon, but we had also been thinking that having the addresses of these like visits and stuff would both help us know if someone's housing situation had changed and where they had moved to, but it would also help us map within the community where different services were happening, and that would give us a clear idea of, maybe places that were not being as serviced as well as others.
Thank you. So it sounds like the takeaway here is really if there could be a flag if someone's still in their home, that would really help with analyses and graphs and mapping things out.
So what I know that it's a little bit late for this, but what I would say is that if they move out of their home and into an institutional care setting of any kind, nursing home, assisted living, anything like that, even no matter where they go, if they move out of their own home, they're no longer a client or a participant of ours because they have access to other resources to get what they need. What I will say in my experience, there are two reasons why people stop. Well, actually 3 reasons people are no longer participants of ours. 1, they move outside of our area. 2, they go into an institutional care setting, or 3, they pass away. Other than that, we tend to work with people for as long as they want to. I can say that we have one person that we've worked with for over 25 years because it's just, we are part of their support system. So, but this is really, we have the ability to edit how we track our data, the system that we use, and adding some of this is going to be fairly easy. And once we start using it, we will have some of these answers then.
Wonderful. One other question is, have you attempted to explore the question of what enables clients to stay in their home, and what were the main blockers for being able to answer it? I think we've touched upon it with some of the previous answers, but I'll put it out there, and Team 1, if you could take it, that'd be great.
I think we kind of addressed this with, there was no indicator whether a client was still in their home or not at any point in the data. We just had to infer it from if they haven't used it for 30 days or 90 days. We don't know if that means they're not in their home or if they're got other assistance. So that's why having that particular flag we felt would be pretty valuable for answering this question.
That being said, I think just looking at those kind of total counts of usage over time, seeing clearly how used the rights for doctor's visits or the pantry are within the service, these are clearly really important aspects of what ElderNet offers the clients. So, I guess one could extrapolate from that these specific services appear to help clients stay in their home, but we just didn't have any means to test that hypothesis.
Absolutely. All right, so that is Team 1. Fantastic job. This is really insightful, really interesting findings. And I know there's been a ton of work that's gone into this, so huge thank you. That said, we are ready to go into Team 2's presentation. I will let them share the screen if they wish to, or Team 2, let me know if you'd like me to present, but I'll stop sharing for now and let me know how you'd like to proceed.
So I'll be controlling the slides.
Great.
Awesome.
All right. So good evening, everyone. We are Team 2. First of all, thank you very much for coming out here today and giving us the opportunity to present. So our assignment for this Datathon was to create a decision-making insights dashboard. And me and my colleagues did this while using a lot of different tools. So we had a lot of great data from ElderNet and we started analyzing it. using R and Python, but the tools that we ended up using for this insights dashboard were Power BI and Tableau. So I think the whole goal that we kept in mind while trying to do this analysis was to create a visualization that can deliver important insights and is also easy to be managed and updated, and also something that's user-friendly and can be leveraged by the ElderNet staff in the future. So with that in mind, I'm going to pass it on to my colleague Michelle so she can walk you through the first dashboard.
Okay, hi, thank you, Paramita. Like Paramita said, our goal was to make a few dashboards that would be easily maintained internally and fairly straightforward so that ElderNet can keep using these dashboards as they update their data. So the first dashboard is that we have is about financials. So I have a little recording of the clip for the dashboard just to walk us through it. But if you want, we can actually go to the dashboard itself. It's linked here. But yes, so this is basically what you would see if you go onto the dashboard, and you start here on the right-hand side. So these are all the different campaign types that ElderNet's data set provided us. And this is kind of overwhelming. There's a lot of different information. So if you wanted to see different campaign types and number of donors and how much donations, average donations, and how it kind of changed and varied over time, you can select each of them sequentially and stack them up. So it's very easy to use, very straightforward. So here on the bottom right, you see the donations as they differ by zip code. And this part of the dashboard is also easily manipulated. You can zoom in, zoom out, change what you're looking at. But really, this is just showing the AMC RC campaign. And as I said, you can select different campaign types and it'll change each of the panels as you go through. So if I wanted to see fall towns as well as spring event, those can also be stacked up, and you see the relative differences in the donations as well as over time. So that was sort of the goal of our financials dashboard, to leverage all this data and be able to see it across different panels and be easily updated as you go through the different facets of information you might want to display. With that being said, I'll switch over to Sean, who is in charge of care management dashboard. Sean.
Thank you, Michelle. So the second dashboard is the care management dashboard. With this dashboard, we had the demographics of the clients. So client county, so you can see client county shows the proportion of clients who live in Montgomery County versus if they don't live in Montgomery County. We have the client age group. There were 33% of clients that were not assigned to an age group, and the other age groups vary between, I guess, around 10% to 25% of the total. The client ethnicity, it's basically if the client is classified as a minority or not. The vast majority of clients were not classified as a minority. We're not classified as a minority or not, 75%. And then the client economic status is basically, it classifies whether a client is in poverty or not. I guess based on this, it seems that the majority of clients are in fact in poverty. The next graph is the pie graph. So basically this one is the proportion of assistance categories compared to the total amounts of assistance provided. So for the total amount of assistance provided, we wanted to see how each of the assistance categories relate to the total amount provided. So for example, the highest proportion of assistance categories is the remote contact with client. And then the lowest proportion is the internal discussions and ElderNet office. The graph on the right is basically the party to client interactions as a % of total amount by assistance category. So for example, with the remote contact with client, there are three, it's initiated by 3 different parties: client, ElderNet, and other party. So with ElderNet, the interactions between ElderNet and the client made up 75% of, around 75% of the total amount by remote contact with client. And yeah, next slide. So this, whoops. So this graph shows the types of assistance and the benefits they provide. So we couldn't figure out how to tie all of the assistance and benefits together into one dashboard. So we just decided to analyze assistance 1 and benefit 1. So for assistance 1, there were 9 categories that we analyzed: continuation up until support. And we did a ranking. Basically, we ranked by column. So for example, if we take the enrollment column in assistance 1, and then if we look at housing, we see that the housing is rank 1 in enrollment. So basically, when clients contact ElderNet for assistance for enrollment, they contact ElderNet mainly for housing as number 1. And yeah, so that's pretty much our the dashboard 2. Paramita will do dashboard 3.
Thanks, Sean. Okay, so for client engagement, we did 2 dashboards, and these are slightly different because they were done in Power BI as opposed to Tableau. So the first dashboard that we have on the screen is for volunteer services. So on the left, similar to Team 1, we just did some analysis on how many hours were volunteered for rides by category, and also the total number of rides that were provided by category. So we can see there that doctor's appointment and shopping, the essentials are some of the top categories. And then on the right, we kind of see how the number of rides varied over the time span of 2019 Jan to 2021 September. The dashboards, the visuals below are related to the demographics. So they kind of break down how a category data is merged with demographics. So for instance, for the doctor's appointment category, you can see it has the largest number of rides, but if you go to the minority dashboard on the right, you will see that most people who were in this doctor's appointment category who used the rights were identified themselves as non-minority. And I will share my screen and kind of would like to show how interactive it is, but before that, I think we can go to the second slide, Michelle, and then I can share my screen. Okay, so the second client engagement dashboard that we created was food pantry interactions. So here, again, on the left, we kind of divided the pantry requests by a client. We divided them by assistance category. So the pantry bondage, that category had the most number of client interactions. And then we saw how by unit it varied across time. So you can see like from 2019 to 2021, 2019 to 2020, there was a spike in the amount of food that was provided, and then it kind of declined a little. And then similar to the volunteer services dashboard, we merged this data with demographics, which helps us kind of see how like demographics tie into this data. So I'll just share my screen for 1 minute because I think I would like to show the benefit of the interactive visualization. Okay. Okay. So the reason we chose these tools were because given it's an interactive dashboard, it gives us the opportunity to do some quick analysis. And one of the things that we found really interesting was we could easily see what type of demographics were related to each category. So if I clicked on doctor's appointment, like the visualizations kind of adjusted themselves. So now we can see for like a particular doctor appointment category, how many hours were volunteered, how it varied over time. We can also see like which age group used this the most. So I believe that kind of information can be helpful when ElderNet is going through its intake process. If someone from a particular age group is trying to enroll, appropriate services can be recommended to them. So I think that's the whole theme that we were trying to go after while merging all the volunteer services data set with the demographics. And then similarly for the pantry dashboards too, for instance, if we wanted to see what type of age group uses which assistant category the most, that could be done by just easily exporting data into either of these tools and analyzing these trends. So with that being said, I think we created 4 different visualizations, 2 in Power BI and 2 in Tableau, and we were hoping that these can be used as prototypes for ElderNet to use to build their visualizations and get some valuable insights. Thank you. I think we're ready to take any questions now.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for showing us the dashboard. That is really, really wonderful to see. I think there's a lot of data that can be explored in those visuals. So I'm really excited to see that. Brandon, would you like to ask some questions, share some thoughts?
So I have one question, and it's going to seem very, very basic, so please forgive me, but how easy, the dashboards that you created, how easily are they uploaded onto a website? This is the kind of information I want to put out to the community. I want the community to understand more about our services and the people in poverty, particularly for those of you who don't know anything about Lower Marion. It's a very affluent area, so one of the challenges we face is whenever we talk about poverty in the community, we generally get the, well, poverty isn't here, that's in Philadelphia or Norristown. So how easily uploadable are they? Are there different, I guess taking different pieces of it and putting it all in, maybe into taking the 3 pieces from the 3 different areas and putting them together? How easy or complex would that be?
So for Tableau, like 2 of the notebooks that we have are Tableau, and we uploaded the notebooks to Tableau Public. So they're already public for anyone to see if they have the link. So if we just share the link with you guys, then you guys can just, oh, sorry.
Yeah, if you see the slides, you have the hyperlink there, and if you click on it, it should open up to a dashboard already, and you should be able to click through it that was kind of our goal here too, to be able to have be easily managed. And it's fairly simple to just put the Excel spreadsheet on through Tableau and update things as you get more data.
Okay, all right, thank you. Great insights, particularly looking at the programmatic side of things. We often talk about ElderNet as a whole, but trying to look down and get down into the individual parts, it's great to see. It's nice to have the ability to see the different ways in which our programs operate and the different demographics that go into it. It is gonna help inform our decisions moving forward, but also it will help us identify funders specifically for specific populations. So I thank you very much for putting it all together.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I think we can work with the team to try and get this to a point where maybe you can refresh the data, you can have it shared with the community. So we can definitely discuss it with the team and see how we can make that happen. Let me share my screen. We have a couple more questions. So sorry, I have a bunch of things up here. All right, team 2, what stood out to you as you were visualizing the data? Very broad question.
Well, I think what stood out to us while visualizing the data were basically what was the primary forms of benefit, the primary types of assistance, and in addition to that, the assistance category first, and then that's what it was. But I think that that just looking at those individual elements alone, it appeared as though, you know, they were just one dimensional. They were critical, but they were just one dimensional. So we needed a way to combine them into Tableau, looking at two factors at once.
I think when I was like looking at the pantry data, it was interesting because in terms of demographics, since this area, like there's like less percentage of minority anyways in like Montgomery County by like how like the makeup is, the statistical makeup. But like one thing that I noticed during pantry was like more like the pantry services were mostly used by minority clients and also people who identified like who had the poverty flag identified as Y. So if we are like planning to expand in newer areas, maybe like I think one of ElderNet's goal is to expand into other communities, and if there is a community which kind of matches the demographic makeup, maybe those services or assistances could be not like marketing is not the appropriate word, but like recommended to enroll new clients.
I think in terms of the donations data, we noticed that there's understandably a huge spike in donations around December, like the holidays, people are feeling more giving. And so maybe focusing a lot of efforts around that period of time could really leverage, you know, the audience that you're not marketing to, again, not using that term, but that you're trying to engage when you're trying to get more donations.
Oh yeah, going along with what Michelle said, we didn't look at like the donations that occurred after the spring event and the fall event. So when we looked at the spring, I think it was like, I forgot the specific event it was, but it was like spring towns, or I think it was like fall towns, and then there was a spring event. But like So we looked at spring event, and then we saw the 3 months after that, like around like March to May, we saw there was like a spike in donations after whenever the spring event occurred. And then like for fall towns, we looked at that event and we noticed that around fall or winter, there was like a spike in donations like after that fall towns event. So of course, like focusing potentially on those two events would bring a good amount of donations. Like it's pretty seasonal, those events, I guess. So
Yeah, so it sounds like donations are, or donations tend to gravitate around events. So maybe focusing on events might be a way to go if you'd like to focus on that.
We have some plans coming into play for some additional events, some smaller events, maybe family-friendly events as well. They're going to draw some more attention, some more funding in, and spread those out throughout the community. So we're already working on that much, but I thank you very much for the insight.
And then similar question as for team one, was there a data element or variable that was not present, but that you would have liked to have had access to? Seems like maybe there was plenty of data there.
So I think there was like one variable, I think maybe more granular, like geographical information, because I think there was like one county option where it had Montgomery and other. So that variable we couldn't really like use a lot because of that. So I guess it was more at a more granular level, we could have done some more exploration with it.
Yeah, going off of what we were just saying, for the donation data, at least in terms of zip codes, there were, obviously like more focused on around Montgomery, but there are also other kind of California, like there were stuff in the East and the West Coast. And it would have been useful, I think, to know where the events occurred. Like how can you maybe focus one event more so in this area versus another? Because I think we were going off of the zip codes of the donors themselves. And I don't know if they made it to the event or if they heard about it from another relative. Like how did they, somebody on the West Coast know about ElderNet?
Got it. And yeah, some of the data issues or limitations in the data were partly because of the public nature of this Datathon. So Datathon leads tried to protect the identity. So we removed a lot of that geographic information, especially on clients. But potentially for ElderNet, designing these visualizations in-house might be an opportunity to have that information in.
It was definitely very cool though, seeing the breadth of reach that ElderNet has. It's not just, in this area, but it's all over the US.
Yeah, let's see. Really cool visualizations. Could you walk us through an example or a few of how you would recommend that ElderNet best use this dashboard?
Amita, do you want to give an example?
Yeah, sure. So I think with the client engagement dashboards, with the categories, I think the way we were envisioning ElderNet to use them is if they knew like the highest categories where like volunteer hours were most, they could like kind of like plan their like what amount of volunteers they need accordingly. Also just with these tools, like the benefit is that you can just like click around and like get more granular information. You don't have to like write code. So you can just like click on a specific, if you want to like delve into a specific year, you can just click on it and see how different like categories change. And also like with client engagement, like the whole reason of kind of tying it up with demographics was to kind of use that information in like the future intake of clients. So if someone matched like a particular particular demographic demographic markers from similar to the demographic profile in the dashboard, you can kind of recommend services to them based on that.
Really cool. And I think this is going to be very helpful going forward for setting this up. Related to the tools that you used, is there any reason to use Power BI over Tableau for one of the dashboards, or what would you recommend?
I think they're pretty similar. We were just like exploring both. I don't know, Sean, you worked on both. Do you have like a preference?
I think like Power BI provides more services for free, whereas like with Tableau, I think some services like are gated by like a paywall. So I guess if you're just someone who, you know, wants to utilize like data visualizations, like the majority of it, like without having to pay anything, then Power BI is a better option. But I feel like in terms of ease of use, like I feel like Tableau, it has been easier for me to create visualizations like in Tableau compared to Power BI. Like I feel like the UI, like the user interface is more intuitive in Tableau than Power BI, but that's just me. So yeah.
Yeah, to some extent, it's a matter of preference. I see Michelle pasted a link from Tableau for donations, for license donations. So that might be something to explore as well.
Yeah, so this is, I think, for Tableau has special licenses for nonprofits, so you can select the country you're from and then visit the distribution partner. But yeah, I think Power BI, one thing to know about that is I think it's specific to PCs. So if you're a Mac user,
Yeah.
I don't think you can, it's not easy
Yeah.
to use. So just to keep in mind.
Good to know. All right, final question. Can these dashboards be embedded directly onto ElderNet's website?
Yeah, I think no, Sean, you can go ahead.
Oh yeah, with the Tableau dashboards, I think, I mean, I've never really embedded it onto a website, but I think there is an option for you to embed the dashboard onto the ElderNet website for Tableau. I don't know about Power BI because I haven't really published a notebook Power BI, but I'm sure there are options like to do that too.
The thing with Power BI is that you're going to have to pay. I believe that you have to pay in order to do that. You can't just do that automatically.
Okay.
You'll have to. You're gonna. I mean, it's going to require a subscription for you to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Brandon.
No, I was just going to say that this is all. It's actually all very timely. We're rolling out a new website on Friday, so if anybody wants to look at our new website, it's going to be eldernet.org. So Friday after that, check it out. And there's a lot of changes going to it, and I can see taking a lot of this and implementing it. A lot of these dashboards and implementing them onto our website and just making it one big rollout. I know that we're not going to have it up and running or to a point where we're going to be able to do so by Friday, but in the near future, if we were able to do that, it would just enhance the ability for people to see who it is we actually serve.
That's awesome. And it does sound like there's a little bit of tinkering that might still be necessary to figure out how to embed this, but these tools usually come with that in mind because dashboards are supposed to be interactive. So there's got to be a way. It just might take some figuring out. All right. So great job, Team 2. Thank you so much for all the work that you've done. This is absolutely amazing to see this data visualized and presented so beautifully. So thank you for that. And we are right on time. We will move to team number 3, who explored growth opportunities and ideas and future directions for ElderNet. So I will stop sharing, and team 3, feel free to go ahead and take over.
Hello, my name's LaSally Chankachith, and I will be emceeing for Team 3. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and here we go. So Team 3 focused on growth, on growth for ElderNet, and this is our team. Sorry, I'm driving very fast, but I do want to acknowledge a few team members who couldn't be here. Zane Dax, she basically started our team off with some really excellent EDAs for us to be able to get our work done. Jamal Green, he's in DC right now, and he did some really excellent mapping for us, especially with the data that we provided for him. And Alicia Paul was our designer for our slide deck. And I want to also thank RLadies Philly, DataPhilly, and ElderNet for sharing your data, and Carla, Anne, and Alice for answering all our questions, our tons of questions that we have posted on Slack. And this is our prompt. So prompt number 1 is future focus. And we looked and we used the census data and another source that Michael Bryan will be talking about to basically review and look at ElderNet's focus. And prompt number 2 is inward. And so we look primarily at donations. And then we will be reviewing the other analyses that we were able to get to, as well as demo a dashboard. So I'm going to hand this over to Michael Bryan, who will be focusing on the census data, our areas of need for future focus. Michael, we can't hear you.
Hey, Leslie?
Yes.
I'm really sorry. I had my internet drop out right at the right time.
That's all right. Are you able to handle this, or would you like me to go?
Too bad.
Great.
So in this section, we're really looking outward, outside of ElderNet. And there's 2 kind of major observations. The first one relates to geography. Both ElderNet's donations as well as the service delivery reflects something called a gravity model. It reflects a location basis. So you can see, especially around the donation map in the upper right, the further you get away from ElderNet's location, you can see that donations start to dissipate. The same thing is true in the lower left. You can see the map has the concentration of service really local to ElderNet's headquarters, and then it starts to dissipate as it goes out. It is important to note here that ElderNet is currently serving Montgomery County, of course, but it's also serving Delaware. It's got client interactions in Westchester and Philadelphia, a great deal of pantry activity serving the West Philadelphia areas. So you can actually see that the location orientation, almost like a retail store, is the nature of the business. From that, you can expect, and as other teams have already shared, that median household income, population, elderly populations, and populations with disabilities, minority populations, those are all good demographic variables that would be available from the census. Now, one note on the census, it was the 2020 census is not done yet. So the most recent decennial full census is 2010. So what we use is something called the American Community Survey, or the ACS. And the 2019 ACS is the most recent version of the census. It's a rolling update over 5 years to have access to. Now, if you look at those variables and you lay them out over the course of over the local geographies, you can see that view tells you where ElderNet's potential next places are. So if ElderNet really is a location-driven service, then what we need to do is find, number one, where the people are. And that's what this chart shows. It's pretty clear that in the region, if you wanted to find people who are multiple dimensions of need arise, the city of Philadelphia is got a heavy, it's almost like the elephant in the room. Going back to Team One's remark, we're feeding an elephant, and the elephant in the room is the city of Philadelphia itself. I would like you to pay attention to a couple of areas. First, due south of ElderNet, where the little gold star is in the middle, due south of that, outside the area of West Philadelphia, there's a concentration of population. It's the Darby area. Also, straight north of the yellow star, up a little bit more, you can see a little cluster. There it is. That's Norristown, and north of Norristown, where there's another cluster of population. If you click forward, we're going to start seeing the other attributes of demographics, which lend themselves to 4 target areas for growth. The first is Coatesville. Coatesville is in Chester County, central west Chester County. And it is, you can see on this chart, the darker the purple, the lower the income. So Coatesville is in western Chester County. In the far west corner of Montgomery County, that's Pottstown. Pottstown has a need. I mentioned on the previous slide, you can see a purple rectangle right above ElderNet's location. Right, if you click forward, you can actually see that very same location in dark purple. That's the Norristown area, and there's poverty there. Finally, as we get into the elderly and disabilities, both of those things tend to be driven much more by the actual population rather than their individual shares. So if you could click forward, one more slide. Yes, this is a favorite. I really want to shout out to Jamal Green, who helped prepare these graphics and our access to the census data. This slide actually combines those two effects, disabilities and over 55. And once again, you can see that there are gray areas on the western side of Chester County, the western corner of Montgomery County. There's a light green straight north of ElderNet now, and that is Norristown, as well as the Darby area, just eastern Delaware County, just outside Philadelphia. So those would be the 4 target areas if we're simply using the demographic metrics on their own basis. The second observation, that's the demographic view. The next observation we really want to have is how ElderNet services compare. What is the opportunity to grow the scope of the services that it provides? Fortunately, there are other public data sources, federal, state, and county data sources on social services in general and elderly services. You should know that the ability to append detail really does come from the census data that we've already talked about. The other federal open public data source publications are really very much oriented around reporting on law and reporting against budgets. So they do give pretty obvious trends that I think that the proportion of the population that is elderly is growing. Those are pretty public, pretty obvious trends. But what it also does is if we compare what the government offers as social services, and we compare that to what ElderNet's service volumes are, and the services and categories within services, we can marry those together and see where there might be opportunities for ElderNet to grow. So imagine the master menu being the government's list of social services and ElderNet's service and category combinations being their menu. If you click forward, it really draws 5 conclusions, and one is a gimme. ElderNet surely already does this, but connecting in their care management, connecting people with SNAP, with housing for the homeless, with emergency services, Medicare consulting, those sorts of basic human needs. I'm sure ElderNet encounters the homeless, they encounter people in desperate straits that are beyond just longer term social work, but making sure that all of your services integrate with those public services for basic human needs. And then 4 more categories, and these are really open-ended. Homebound services, the government has many programs to make sure that food and caregivers and caregiver support systems, caregiving services are all available to the elderly. There's also at different levels, especially locally, there are service center, senior centers, adult daycare centers, YMCA programs that provide activity for the elderly so that they remain socialized and healthy in that dimension. Health services, of course, there's Medicare and prescription social services like PACE and Medi. And finally, financial support services. I'm going to hand this over to Cara in a moment, but making sure that the elderly have their affairs in order, their taxes, their insurance, their social security. That's really a social worker would certainly take care of the social security aspects, but helping them with other basic activities of life in their financial health is helpful too. So Leslie, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Michael. That was future focus. And so now we're going to go and look at the internal focus of our ElderNet's growth. Cara?
Yeah, thank you. So I will be talking to the forecasting and just general trends, which was touched upon in group team 1 and team 2 a bit, but the graph displayed in this slide right now is just a time series look at donations, excluding the large outlier value, because talking to ElderNet, they said that value was not going to be shown again, or was not going to come up again. So the next few slides, you'll see graphs that look like this. And just to give a brief overview, can you go back? Just to give a brief overview, the forecasted values are the dotted lines like 2022, and then the shaded area is just, because we didn't have much data that was acknowledged by ElderNet today. We had, I think, a little less than 3 years. It's really hard to make any statistical forecasting with that amount of data. Also, given that the pandemic, I'm sure many other people saw that and talked to even earlier that it impacted trends in the data. So it's difficult to really forecast. So the best route that we decided, to show for this section, and we have some other cool maps too, is that, take the average as the dotted line, maybe just like a guess of what it might be. And then the shaded area is like the min and max for each month. The other team, I think team 1 did 30 days rolling averages. This is just summing for each month the amount of monetary amount of donations. So go to the next slide, please. So this is the pantry, just a raw count of the pounds distributed by month. And as you can see, there's some peaks and valleys in here. Definitely November of most years, of the 2 years that we have data for November, a huge peak there. Makes sense because of Thanksgiving and the holidays, and then some other small local maximum throughout the graph as well. Next slide. And then these two categories, care management and volunteer services, were lumped together because, as you can see, and that was explained earlier, that volunteer services fell over time because of the pandemic and doctors' offices being closed. Care management, when you just look at the amount of contacts, this is not a summing of the time of the contact, but just the contact itself, count of contacts, that fell over time as well. So, that's maybe likely due to to the pandemic or other circumstances. And that, I think, makes it difficult to forecast what's going to happen next. As we all know, it's unpredictable in terms of pandemics, that what's going to happen next. It'd be hard to say, from my perspective of being an outside just volunteer looking at the data, it's hard for me to say what will happen next with this data. So hopefully, looking at these graphs and getting an appreciation of what the minimum and maximum values were for each month across the nearly 3 years, might give decision makers some ideas. Next slide. So now I'm going to talk a little bit more about donations. We saw that donations related to median household income across zip codes, it was statistically significant. However, next slide, please. When we just look at the donations by zip code for non-corporation donations, as you can see, there's just a high concentrate of donations where ElderNet serves. ElderNet is the small yellow star. Thank you for, in the center there. So it's hard to say exactly, if it really correlates with median household income, or the fact that, Lower Marion is a very wealthy zip code, and, it is, the center of where ElderNet serves. And also, as you can see, you have some outer outlying counties where there are donations being collected. So again, this is 2019, where the total donations were a little over 300,000 for non-corporation donations. Next slide. And then in 2020, because of the pandemic, as stated by the teams, they did see an increase in donations. You do see some higher, some outlying zip codes outside of ElderNet giving more donations. There's that little purple area, a little north, that zip code. There's some other outlying in Chester County out west. But then when you jump to 2021, next slide, you see some of that go away out in Chester County. You see that central Delaware County, gain some more traction, and also a little north of where ElderNet serves. So generally, this is a great visual, and I'd like to thank Jamal Green again for putting that map together. This is a great visual to show where exactly donations are coming from every year for ElderNet for non-corporations. So I'd like to pass it on to Michael Holt for the other analyses.
Thank you for presenting, Kara. Mine is called Other Analyses, or it's not mine and Dave, because we're describing things which we found to be interesting in the data, or interesting ways to look at the data, which didn't seem immediately actionable or didn't fit into a multi-slide narrative. For example, here we have a sum of donations, starting with the smallest and adding up. With it, you can see that donations below $10,000 all contributed to almost 50% of the total money in our data set. And donations below $25,000 contributed 70% of the donations in our data set. Of note is, this is zoomed in, obviously it goes to 100%. And towards the end, we have that outlier, which was around $186,000, which was more than 10% of the total donations. Going forward with this, next slide, please. It seems nice to expand into audiences which might give smaller donations more casually. For example, you already have similar programs or apps such as Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn might give people a lot more sort of relaxed opportunities to make donations when they feel the need. Next slide, please. Here we have a count of events sorted by the hours they occurred. Specifically, taking the pantry data set and the care management data set and looking at them side by side. Of note is the pantry events peaked at 11 a.m. and were not as busy throughout the day, towards the end of the day. Meanwhile, care management events were more evenly distributed, but tended to peak around 12 p.m. and around 2 p.m. This might be interesting or might be useful going forward if you are able to maneuver services around different types of events. Also of note is that if we had more data, we might be able to do predictive things or causal things, sort of seeing if we could use hypothetically pantry events as a hook to get people more involved in care management services. So almost advertisement through whichever service seems to be the most charming to bring people into the system overall. All right, next slide, please. And here we have Dave's awesome maps and presentations.
Hi, along with all of the static images of all the maps that we created, I thought it'd be helpful to be able to have an interactive map. And I'm sharing my screen. So that's available now, that you'd be able to select based off of a number of census demographic info, all kinds of attributes, and be able to zoom in and really understand more. We also have, for example, say maybe the share of the people in that zip code or exacta, the census equivalent of the zip code, or be able to see median household income. Really seeing, say, areas like near Radnor, which have much higher income. And I wanted to briefly also mention, there wasn't time for it, but I was also working on having this available by census tract. Hoping to sometime soon be able to share it, to be able to be selectable by census tract. For example, this has the total amount of people over 55 by census tract. And there's a selection of how the opacity of how transparent you want these polygons to be. And you can go to the next slide. Back to Lasali.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Dave and Kara. So that was our presentation. So in summary, excuse me. Results were observational based on what we found as a team. We couldn't make statistical assertions based on the quality of the data that was given to us. And we focused primarily on geography and saw that the demographics matter, working with the census data, and that the donations were related to median household income that were there. And if you noted with the 3 maps that were for donations in the second year of being in the pandemic, the donations did drop, and we don't have enough data or to basically assert that maybe it was due to the fact that because of the long haul with the pandemic and people not being able to work. That's just an assumption. We can't fully see how that's going to affect donations going forward. And again, it was mentioned on our elephant theme that Philadelphia is the elephant in the room because of its population size, and if ElderNet should go there. And the public data that we use is going to be continually defined for future services for ElderNet. And we used something that was mentioned, which is called Zacta, and I believe Michael Bryan can elaborate on that later if needed. And we accessed a few of the files that were provided for us but we focused primarily on zip codes. And again, we looked at the 2019 American Community Survey with their 5-year estimates, and using the ACS geographical delineations for the Tiger Line and other federal, state, and social services reports. Here is just a visual of all of the different IDEs and products that we use from both R and Python for our technologies and for the research that we did. And we want to special, this is from Alicia. She just wanted to thank Slide Carnival and Unsplash for a few of the images that we use. So thank you, and questions?
Really wonderful job, Team 3. I think there's going to be a lot of clicking around and looking at all the insights that you guys produced. This is really, really cool. Brandon, do you have any questions? Would you like to offer some thoughts?
So I will say that watching that, I do want to get in, and I just want to click around and see everything that is there. One of the things that stood out to me was looking at the different neighborhoods, and particularly whenever you're looking at the donations, there was one community just north of where we were at, where it started out in 2020 was just like a slight shade of purple, but then it got darker. And just trying to, what community is that, and can we identify where that came from? But at the same time, looking at the moving forward with different things, I think that the maps that you used are very indicative about how we need to approach this, because each one of those little communities is each community is different. So looking at Philadelphia as being the elephant in the room, I would love to be able to do that. However, each part of Philadelphia is going to be its own separate thing. So I look at this as just a kind of a slow growth, but a lot of great information there. The one question that I do have, and I'll preface this by saying, going back to the slide where you look at the events by hour between the pantry and care management, that's actually really, really telling. Particularly as we try to bring on more staff and we get volunteers in place. If there are times when it's going to be busier, we can certainly use that information to build into it. But in that, you'd said that if you had access to more data or different data points, that you'd be able to be predictive with everything. What kind of data points are you talking about there? Just so I can keep an eye on that as we look into the future.
First, I think I guess one is that if we just had we only had 3 years worth of data, and if we had a larger quantity of years, because you have been around for more than 70, 75 years, I assume, right? So if we had a greater,
Okay.
But basically more years would have allowed for a greater predictability.
Okay.
I'd also like to invite you to look into something called geocoding. While, of course, for the Datathon, you needed to be able to anonymize the data. When you anonymize the data to a zip code level, a zip code is actually a very large number of people, and zip codes are not census geographies. The census geographies you should be looking at are called block groups, and the Census Department actually has a service where if you put in someone's address, they'll tell you what block group they're in. It's something that can be done programmatically if you wanted to. But collecting the block groups, think of it about the size of a polling location, the area around where you would go vote. That's about the size of a block group. We'd have much more granularity and specificity and variety in the census attribution if you got down to a lower level of geography.
Okay.
Also, I just wanted to add, there are some academic studies or nonprofit studies that have already tried to look into predictive models, especially when it comes to donations. That's what I researched a little bit. So we hope to include some links in the report of maybe some starting points of, there were a bunch of variables listed in those reports.
I'll look forward to getting those. Just as you said, as a starting point. I have some volunteers who have some extra time on their hands, so if they can start doing some work for us, then I'd love to get them involved in it.
It sounds from
Externally,
just quickly, it sounds from Michael's point that you might be able to add some context and understanding of each client's situation by gathering some of this information from the census block in terms of where it is that they live, what is the context, what's the population around them, that kind of stuff, to add a little bit more understanding of potentially new clients and existing clients.
Yeah,
Sorry.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Michael, you were going to say something. I cut you off. I'm sorry.
you were brilliant. I would say there's two other attributes I thought were kind of missing. We had a tough time trying to relate the actual service activity to what we expected demand to be. We actually attempted to build one of these location models to predict what the best places or what the best fits would be based on ElderNet's current observed services.
Mm-hmm.
And the model didn't work. And that's because that indicates that your current service activities are not indicative of the demand in the area. It would be great if there were other sources where you would know what the level of demand for elder services is. I don't know if we couldn't get that from the Pennsylvania State Office of Aging or Montgomery County Senior Services. Any other data source you could have externally that would tell you about the unmet needs for elder social services would be helpful.
I think that a lot of that would come down to local elected officials and local municipalities and reaching out to them and just seeing what kind of need that they may have. There are a couple of the areas that we're considering maybe providing some support to. It's based on the needs identified by the local electeds and any committees that they may have that identify the needs. So that's where I would start. However, I'm certain that there are a lot more than that, maybe even reaching out to local religious organizations as well to see what kind of demand they may be able to help us identify. But great insight, Michael. Thank you.
We have a couple of questions that came up for team 3, and we don't have a ton of time, so I'll just go over a few. Have you had a chance to look at patterns of care management assistance forms or benefit needs over time?
I think we took a little bit of a look at like which care management categories were the most common. We didn't have enough time to try to build a predictive model with that.
You did a lot, so this is a lot already. It's really cool what you've presented. So all right, let's see. What would you recommend as a strategy for ElderNet when it comes to evaluating options for growth in the future?
Collecting data. I think some of the other things have already been addressed too. I don't know if somebody else wants to take that.
I would say making sure that the data that you have is consistent, because there were some inconsistencies with the data that was provided, and it was difficult for the team to work through them. Very similar to that, but if the data that was collected and there was a greater focus on the quality of the data, and I think that if we were to revisit what is there already, and we could probably go down more granularly with the different teams that have already worked on the data, and probably be able to provide greater recommendation. But at this time, one thing that I would recommend would probably be considering for the meal plans, or even providing rides, maybe consider working with the ride shares that are already there, Uber and Lyft, maybe working with them and seeing if there's a way for them to get a tax break off by providing these ride shares for the elder community. And that's one way of exploring that as a growth for that particular market. That was just something I would look at. And another thing is, I know that we had mentioned, but it was at the very bottom, taxes and financial aspects. And that is something that I think ElderNet could help out really as a way to grow, because one of the things that is very hard for senior citizens is that they are financially vulnerable to sharks, to people who are helping them in going through that, but then they become victims to a lot of financial scams. And especially with tax season coming up, and a lot of things are more online, more technology oriented, a lot of our seniors are not tech savvy. And that is where I think one of the two growths for ElderNet is doing the finances tax wise and helping seniors with those, as well as probably utilizing rideshare.
I'd add a comment strategically, and this builds on some things Holly just mentioned. In terms of strategy, I'm more of a marketer, so I think of competitive strategy. ElderNet is providing social services to the vulnerable elderly in poverty. There are other people around you, other organizations providing similar services. So recognizing where your niche is or where you differentiate, where does ElderNet end and Montgomery County services begin? Where does ElderNet specialize, where like Catholic Social Services in Philadelphia does a great deal of this stuff too. So where does ElderNet's services end and where does another's begin? Would allow you to know, also in the sense of demand, it would allow you to know where those other organizations are not providing, as well as where the demand is.
Thank you. That's really helpful. One last question. This is more of an approach question. So if we are a total beginner to working with these census data sets, do you have a recommendation to start?
Sure. First, there's data.census.gov. The Census Bureau itself, publishing data is its very mission in life. So they actively teach people how to use the data. So data.census.gov is a brand new way for you to navigate and query the data visually if you want to go grab data sets and download them. I think other teams also used the R package Tidy Census is available, and that makes accessing the data programmatically in R if you have any statisticians that are R savvy. There's also something called in Python, it's called GeoPandas, and you can download the entire ACS data set is roughly 36,000 variables. It's 30 gigs in size, and it includes all of their geographic footprint. So you can download that and actually work on it on a powerful local computer as well. And of course, there's this incredibly valuable thing called YouTube. YouTube's got lots of people trying to explain the census data. That's helpful. And personally, if you start to get more advanced, the American Community Survey has a users group. And you can sign up for the users group and ask a question. And there are a bunch of demographers and hobbyist demographers out there happy to jump on the question that you have.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really wonderful. All right. So huge thank you to Team 3 and huge thank you to all of the teams for doing an absolutely phenomenal job with digging into these data sets, trying to make sense of them, getting insights, and really doing a phenomenal job with these presentations. So I'm really, really blown away. I'm so proud of all the work that all of you have done. We're just beaming here. So I'm huge thank you to all the participants. Brandon, you wanted to say something? Or?
Yeah, I just want to take a moment to thank you all again for all of the work that you put into this. There are a lot of insights, a lot of information that we can take and we can use to improve what we do and do it in different areas. I'm going to share this link with my board and with my staff, and I hope that everyone gets excited, as excited and energized as I am right now, because this is step one to ElderNet becoming a bigger force to be reckoned with in the community and supporting our older and disabled adults. So I want to thank you all very, very much for all of your time, all of your hard work. And with your permission, I may be in touch with some of you, just ask some follow-up questions. So yes, I can't thank you enough for this. I'm really, really excited to get started on implementing some of these things. And I also want to thank Carla and Rama. I don't know if Rama's on the call or not.
Rama had a conflict, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, I want to thank both of you for connecting ElderNet with this and kind of picking it up and getting us to this point. I know that our lack of data was a little bit of it created some problems, but you were really, really great to work with. I really enjoyed this, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to do something again like this in the future.
Absolutely. And I want to say a huge thank you to ElderNet for making these data sets available to us and very patiently walking us through all of them and talking with us about how to clean them, how to prepare them for this Datathon to make them available to the bigger audience. So big thank you for that. And then thank you to the Datathon leads and the other organizers who have been involved in making this possible. It's been a very big joint effort. So it worked smoothly because there were so many people that kind of made this work. So big thank you to that. So with 4 minutes left on this call, I don't want to keep everybody late, but I do want to open it up to all the participants and kind of ask what you enjoyed most, what you learned from it, what is your takeaway from this outside of the insights that you created for ElderNet, just what was your experience like? And I'll stop sharing.
Well, I guess I'll say something. I have more of a Scrum background and Agile methodology, and this was a very interesting experience to deal with data scientists in that trying to utilize that experience. And I find that being a data scientist tends to be more individualized than I expected it to be. I think. I don't know if anyone agrees with that or not, but definitely we had a lot of meetings that we held as a team weekly, even, and we were able to go through the data some but everyone did present their work. I just found it very interesting. I don't know if anyone wants to speak to that as well.
I can speak to that a bit. This is actually my first time doing like a big group project in data science, and it was pretty exciting. And I didn't realize just how helpful and nice it can be to meet up with a bunch of people and just talk about aspects of the data or ways to look at the data, or have people like know where to find data sources and work them in. It was just a really cool experience to sort of share in that with people. And then we all had specific techniques and softwares that we could use to analyze it and go whole different directions. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, teamwork is really, really wonderful. And that's something that we really wanted to encourage with this Datathon. So was there anything that surprised you during this Datathon, during this process? Anything that you learned or you're gonna move forward with and apply in your work going forward?
I can make a personal note. I don't know if the other dataists here have this experience, but I'm used to working with very, very large data sets. Well, it's all a huge matrix of numbers. It's in numeric space. This data wasn't numeric space. This was people. This was people actually getting helped. So moving from a mathematical world to a world where it's actually interacting with people and guiding how they get help and having impact on someone's life was really sort of a mental leap for me.
Any other thoughts before we conclude today's meetup? All right, I see a bunch of things coming up in the comments, so I won't have time to read them now, but I will. So with that, I want to conclude today's meetup. Big thank you to everyone who participated and who made this the success that it was. It's been fascinating to see all of your results. So we're very appreciative, and we will wrap up for ElderNet. We will wrap up all of these analyses, put them into a report. Fingers crossed that we can get that done in a week or two. And then we will coordinate any actions going forward. So big thank you to everyone.
Thank you all
Clap
very
to
much.
everyone. And have a wonderful evening. And then we'll chat in Slack going forward.
Right.
Bye, everyone.